Welcome to WooEnglish. Today, you will learn English through a powerful story. A story about money, risk, and the future of our world. Listen carefully, because what you are about to hear is not just information. It is a journey from rising debt to falling trust to the warning that millions are talking about. Robert Kiyosaki says the global system is changing. Some call it fear, some call it confusion. But today, we will explore it with calm, clear English. So take a breath, open your mind, and join me as we step inside the next chapter of the world economy. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The warning that echoed across the world. The message began with a simple line, a short sentence that moved across social media. Robert Kiyosaki said the world was entering a new age of danger. Not war, not disease, but something quieter. Something hidden. Something growing under our feet. The risk inside the global economy. People shared the message. Some were afraid, some were confused. And some said, "This is just another prediction." But the warning kept spreading because it touched a real fear. A fear that many people already felt but never said out loud. The world had changed fast in the last 10 years. Money moved quicker than people. Markets rose and fell in hours. Nations borrowed more, families borrowed more, and companies borrowed the most. Debt became normal. Debt became the system. And that is where Kiyosaki began. He said the global system looked strong from the outside. Tall buildings, busy streets, fast technology. But inside, the foundations were shaking. Not from one country or one bank, but from something bigger. A long chain connecting everyone. A chain made of promises. People listened because they knew this chain existed. When a small company failed, a bigger one felt it. When one bank had a problem, others became nervous. When one country changed its policy, the whole world reacted. We lived in a connected world, but also a fragile world. Kiyosaki's warning was not new, but this time it felt different. He said global debt was rising faster than global growth. He said money was becoming too easy. He said people trusted numbers more than real value. And he said the next shock could come suddenly. Without noise, like a wave under the surface. The message reached millions. Workers in the U.S., students in Europe, shop owners in Africa, investors in Asia. Everyone heard the same idea. The system is moving into dangerous territory. But here is the question many asked. What made this moment so special? Why did his words feel heavier than before? The answer was simple. Because people were already feeling pressure. Prices of food rose. Rent rose. Energy rose. Salaries stayed the same. Families worked harder but saved less. People felt that something was not normal, even before Kiyosaki said it. And governments also felt the pressure. Some tried to borrow more to help their people. Others cut services. Some raised interest rates. And some lowered them again. Policies changed quickly, like someone trying to fix a ship in the middle of a storm. But storms do not wait. Kiyosaki said the world was living in a time of silent risk. A time when danger grows, but no one sees it. A time when people feel safe because everything looks normal, until something breaks. He spoke about 2008, the year when the global economy collapsed. Banks failed. Markets crashed. Millions lost jobs and homes. People remembered the fear, and he said the same pattern could return. But this story is not only about fear, it is about understanding. It is about looking at the world with clear eyes. Because education is the strongest protection. So let us look at how the warning started. 1 week before the message went viral, Kiyosaki gave a short interview. He said 3 things were creating the new risk. First, global debt. Countries were borrowing money to pay old debts. This created a circle that had no clear exit. Second, weak growth. Many economies slowed down, but spending continued. Third, uncertainty. Wars, trade tensions, new rules, changing technology, all created fear in markets. These 3 forces moved together, slowly but powerfully. In many places, people lived well. Shops were open, flights were full. Factories worked, but under the surface, the numbers were changing. This is why the message felt important. In cities around the world, ordinary people began to ask questions. Why does everything cost more? Why is my salary not enough? Why do banks offer less support? And the most important question, is something bigger happening? Kiyosaki did not say the world would end. He said the world needed to prepare. He said people should understand how money works, how debt works, and how risk grows. Not with fear, but with knowledge. His words created debate. Some experts agreed, some disagreed. But everyone understood one thing. The global economy was entering a new chapter. A chapter where small mistakes could create big results. A chapter where trust mattered more than ever. A chapter where people needed to learn, not panic. And so the warning continued to echo. Through videos, through news, through conversations between friends. It became a reminder that the world is changing, and we must change with it. At the end of this chapter, one question remains. If the warning is real, what comes next? Chapter 2. How Debt Learned to Grow Faster Than Nations. Debt is not new. Countries used it for centuries. Kings borrowed money to fight wars. Merchants borrowed money to build ships. Farmers borrowed money to survive bad seasons. But something changed in the modern world. Something much bigger. Debt stopped being a tool. It became the engine of the entire global system. In the past, nations borrowed slowly. They planned carefully. They feared the idea of owing too much. But after the Second World War, the world began to grow fast. Factories opened. Trade expanded. Cities grew. People believed the future would always be better than the past. So borrowing became easier. Governments took loans to build highways, schools, and hospitals. Companies borrowed to expand production. Families borrowed to buy homes. And for a long time, it seemed to work. But here is the truth. When something works too well, people forget the risk. By the 1980s, global debt was rising. By the 1990s, it was climbing even faster. By the early 2000s, it became unstoppable. It grew faster than economies, faster than salaries, faster than savings. Debt became the new normal. And people stopped asking questions. Banks offered credit easily. Governments promised big projects. Companies borrowed billions for expansion. Everyone believed growth would continue forever. But nothing grows forever. This is the center of Kiyosaki's warning. He said the world created a system where debt grows even when the real economy slows down. A system where numbers rise even when life becomes harder for ordinary people. Let us look at how this happened. In many countries, governments wanted to support growth, so they lowered interest rates. Borrowing became cheaper. Money moved faster. People bought homes, cars, and new technology. Businesses took risks. Investors searched for profit. But cheaper money creates a dangerous habit. It encourages more borrowing and more risk. When the 2008 crisis arrived, the world saw the danger clearly. Banks collapsed under the weight of bad loans. Millions lost jobs. Millions lost homes. Markets fell. Fear spread. So what did governments do? They borrowed even more. They printed money to keep the system alive. It was necessary to prevent a deeper collapse. But it also created a new problem. Debt began to grow at the fastest speed in human history. By 2020, the world faced another shock, the pandemic. Countries closed, businesses stopped. People stayed home. Governments again used debt to protect their economies. They sent money to workers, hospitals, and companies. It helped, but it made debt rise again, to record levels. This is where the story becomes interesting. Debt was no longer a tool for emergencies. It was now the main structure of the global economy. Without debt, growth stops. Without debt, markets fall. Without debt, governments struggle. Imagine a house built on soft ground. It looks beautiful from the outside, but every year it sinks a little deeper. This is how Kiyosaki describes the modern system. People feel the pressure in small ways. Higher prices, higher rent, more loans, less savings. Families work more, but save less. They feel something is wrong, even if they cannot explain it. Countries also feel the pressure. Some nations borrow just to pay old debts. Some cut public services. Some raise taxes. Some argue about who is responsible. The system becomes tense, fragile, unpredictable. Kiyosaki says the danger is not that debt exists. The danger is that debt grows faster than the real economy. Faster than production. Faster than wages. Faster than people can support. It creates an illusion of wealth. Numbers rise on screens. Markets look strong. But behind these numbers, the real value does not grow at the same speed. This is why economists worry. This is why people feel uncertain. Let us look at one example. A government wants to build a new airport. It borrows billions. If the airport brings more trade and jobs, the debt is useful. But if growth slows, the government still must pay the loan, even if the airport is empty. Now imagine this problem not in one country, but in dozens, and not for airports, but for everything. Roads, energy, hospitals, schools, subsidies, pensions. Debt touches every part of modern life. So what happens next? This chapter is not about predicting disaster. It is about understanding the world we live in. A world where debt has its own rhythm, its own speed, its own power. a world where governments try to control it, but often cannot slow it down. Kiyosaki believes the first step is awareness. People must understand how debt shapes the future, how it affects prices, how it affects jobs, how it affects the stability of a nation. If we understand it, we can prepare for it. We can make better decisions. We can protect ourselves from sudden shocks. Debt is not the enemy, blindness is. The chapter ends with one question. If the world depends on debt to function, what happens when the cost of borrowing rises? Are we ready for that moment? Chapter 3. The Rise of Fake Wealth, When Numbers Lose Their Meaning. There is a moment in history when money changed its shape, not from paper to gold, not from gold to silver, but from something real to something almost invisible, something on screens, something in apps, something people trust without ever seeing. This change created what many call fake wealth. And this is the heart of the next part of our story. Fake wealth does not mean false money. It means money that exists only because people believe in it. Money that appears and disappears in seconds. Money that depends on markets moving in the right direction. For centuries, wealth was simple. If you owned land, it had value. If you had gold, it had weight. If you grew food, you could eat. It was physical. It was real. But the modern world works differently. Most of today's wealth is numbers on a screen. These numbers rise when markets are calm, and they fall when fear enters the system. This is why Kiyosaki warned people, do not confuse numbers with real value. To understand this, let us go back to the early 2000s. Technology exploded. Banks created new products. Investors moved money across the world with one click. People saw their accounts grow, sometimes without working more. The future looked bright, fast, unlimited. This period made many believe that wealth was easy, that markets always recovered, that screens told the truth. But screens can lie. The 2008 crisis showed this clearly. Millions of people thought their homes were rising in value. Banks said it. Agents said it. The numbers said it. But when the crisis came, the numbers changed. In one night. People discovered their homes were worth less. Some discovered their homes were worth nothing, and the wealth they believed they had vanished. This is the danger of fake wealth. It grows quickly, it falls quickly, and it depends on trust. Let us look at another example. A company announces a new idea. Investors rush to buy its shares. The price rises. The company becomes a billion-dollar company in days. But what changed in the real world? Nothing. No new products. No new factories. No new workers. Just numbers. Just expectation. Kiyosaki says this is not sustainable. He says the world created markets filled with imagined value based on hope, not results. This does not mean markets are bad. It means people need to understand how markets really work. Fake wealth grows from three forces. First, digital money. People no longer touch their money. They see it on phones. They trust the screen, but they forget the system behind it is fragile. Second, speculation. Investors buy because others are buying. They chase fast profit, not real growth. Third, leverage. This means borrowing money to invest. If the market rises, the profit multiplies. If the market falls, the loss destroys everything. In good times, these forces make people feel rich. In bad times, these forces create collapse. We saw this again in 2020. Markets fell sharply during the pandemic. Then they rose again faster than ever. People stayed home, but their investments grew. Some called it a miracle. Kiyosaki called it a warning. He said the world was living through a period where money was printed, interest rates were low, and markets reacted like balloons, growing bigger and bigger. But balloons do not expand forever. Across the world, ordinary people noticed something strange. Markets went up, but life became harder. Investments grew, but salaries stayed the same. Companies became richer, but workers struggled. It created a disconnect between real life and market life. This disconnect is the center of fake wealth. It makes people think they are safe when they are not. It makes governments believe they can borrow without limits. It makes companies believe they can grow without producing more. And when a system is built on expectations, not production, danger rises. Fake wealth can also hide real problems. If a country faces slow growth, but its stock market rises, leaders celebrate. But the celebration is empty if people cannot buy homes or food. If salaries do not grow, if young people cannot find work. Kiyosaki argues, this is why many people today feel lost. They see rich numbers everywhere, but do not feel richer. They hear the economy is strong, but struggle to pay bills. They see markets rise, but do not see real improvement in their lives. This confusion creates frustration. Frustration creates fear. And fear becomes a powerful force in the global economy. Fake wealth also changes how people think. Some stop saving, some take bigger risks. Some believe they can become rich overnight. This makes the system even more unstable. So what is the solution? Kiyosaki says it begins with education. People must learn the difference between value and price, between assets and speculation, between real wealth and screen wealth. Real wealth comes from things people need: land, resources, skills, businesses, energy, food, and knowledge. These do not vanish when markets fall. Price-based wealth can disappear in 1 hour. The modern world needs both kinds of wealth, but people must know which one is which. They must understand the system they live in. Because when numbers lose their meaning, danger grows quietly. And that brings us to the final question of this chapter. If fake wealth can rise so fast, how quickly can it fall? And what happens when it does? Chapter 4. The Dollar's Crown. Strong, but under pressure. For almost 100 years, the world trusted the US dollar more than any other currency. It became a crown, a symbol of stability, a tool for trade and power. Nations used it to buy oil. Banks used it to store reserves. People used it to protect their savings. The dollar was more than money. It was a global anchor. But even anchors feel pressure. And this chapter explores that pressure. The story begins after the Second World War. The United States grew fast. Its factories produced goods for the whole world. Its economy was strong. Its military was powerful. Its political system looked stable. So countries around the world trusted the dollar. In 1944, an agreement called Bretton Woods made the dollar the center of international finance. It was linked to gold. Other currencies were linked to the dollar. This system created trust. And trust became strength. Even when Bretton Woods ended in the 1970s, the dollar kept its crown. Oil-producing nations continued to demand dollars. Banks continued to hold dollar reserves. Global markets continued to buy and sell using dollars. The system was clear. If you wanted to trade with the world, you needed dollars. For decades, this system worked. The U.S. economy was innovative. Its companies were strong. Its financial markets were deep and liquid. The world believed the dollar was safe. But nothing stays the same forever. Robert Kiyosaki does not say the dollar will collapse. He does not predict disaster. He says something simpler, something more realistic. The dollar is under pressure, and pressure always creates change. So where does this pressure come from? There are three main sources. First, rising debt. The United States, like many nations, borrowed more over the years. It borrowed during wars. It borrowed for infrastructure. It borrowed during crises. Today, the U.S. debt is higher than ever. This does not destroy the dollar. But it creates questions. Questions about long-term stability. Second, global competition. For many years, the U.S. had no challenger. But today, new economies are rising. China grew into the world's second-largest economy. India expanded quickly. Other regions built alliances. Some nations began asking, why must we trade only in dollars? It was not rebellion, it was strategy. Third, shifting trust. Trust is invisible, but powerful. When people feel safe, they keep their money in dollars. When they feel uncertain, they look for alternatives: gold, digital assets, local currencies, even commodities. The search for alternatives puts pressure on the dollar's crown. We must be clear. The dollar is still the most powerful currency in the world. It is used in most global trade. Central banks hold it. Investors depend on it. The financial world is built around it. But this strength does not remove the pressure. Kiyosaki explains it like this. Imagine a strong bridge. It holds millions of cars each day. But if you keep adding weight, day after day, year after year, the bridge will feel it. The dollar is that bridge. Let us look at one example from recent years. Some countries began trading oil in other currencies. Small amounts at first, then more. These decisions did not break the system, but they changed the direction of the wind. The world moved from a single-center system to a multi-center system. More currencies, more strategies, more competition. This change makes some people afraid, but fear is not useful. Understanding is. The dollar still has powerful advantages. The U.S. economy is creative. Its technology sector leads the world. Its markets are open. Its legal system protects investors. These strengths support the dollar. But pressure continues. Slowly, quietly, steadily. People around the world also feel the effects of dollar movements. When the dollar rises, other countries pay more for imports. Local currencies weaken. Inflation grows. Families struggle with higher prices. Small businesses face higher costs. When the dollar falls, markets change again. Investors search for safety. Commodities move. Energy prices shift. This is why Kiyosaki tells people to watch the dollar. Not with panic. Not with excitement. With attention. Because the dollar influences everything: the price of food, the cost of fuel, the stability of savings, and the strength of global trade. The pressure on the dollar does not mean collapse. It means transformation. A slow, long process. A change in how the world shares power. In many countries, leaders discuss new systems. Some talk about regional currencies. Some talk about digital national currencies. Some talk about trade without the dollar. These ideas may take years to develop, but they reflect a real shift. The world is evolving, and every evolution brings uncertainty. Does this mean the dollar will lose its crown tomorrow? Number. But the world is asking more questions. And questions create movement. Movement creates change. This chapter ends with a quiet truth. The dollar is still strong, but the ground under it is starting to move, which leads to the next chapter. If trust in the dollar slowly changes, where do people go to protect their wealth? Chapter 5. Gold, silver, and the return of old money. For thousands of years, people trusted one form of wealth more than any other. Not paper, not banks, not digital numbers, but metal, solid, heavy, and real. Gold and silver shaped economies long before modern finance existed. Kings stored them. Empires fought over them. Merchants traded with them. Families saved them. Because gold and silver had one special power. They survived. When Robert Kiyosaki speaks about financial risk, he always returns to these metals. Not because he wants fear, not because he predicts collapse, but because he believes in this simple truth. Some things keep value even when the world changes. This chapter looks at why old money is returning in a modern world. The story begins with trust. Every currency in history needed trust, but trust rises and falls. Governments change. Policies change. Markets shake. People worry. And when trust weakens, they search for something solid. Gold and silver represent that solidity. Let us go back in time for a moment. Centuries ago, people used gold coins in trade. A gold coin in Asia had the same value as a gold coin in Europe. It did not depend on governments. It did not depend on interest rates. It did not depend on politics. Gold was gold. This made it universal. Even today, when technology dominates life, gold still moves across borders. Central banks buy it. Investors buy it. Families keep it for protection. Why? Because gold does not disappear when markets fall. It cannot break. It cannot be printed. It cannot be erased from a screen. Kiyosaki often says gold and silver are real money, while currencies are temporary money. This is not an attack on modern systems. It is a reminder that paper money has a short life compared to metals. Look at history. Every national currency eventually changed, collapsed, or transformed. But gold remained. Its price moved, but its meaning stayed the same. Now let us look at the present. Why are people returning to gold and silver today? There are three main reasons. First, uncertainty. When inflation rises, people worry their savings will lose value. Gold often rises when prices rise, giving people emotional and financial protection. Second, global tension. Wars, political conflict, and economic competition push investors towards safe assets. They want stability when the world feels unpredictable. Third, pressure on the dollar. As the global system shifts, some investors diversify away from one currency. They do not abandon the dollar. They simply want balance. Gold and silver offer that balance. Imagine a person saving for the future. They have cash in the bank. They hold some investments. But they also keep a small amount of gold or silver. Not to become rich fast, but to stay safe during shocks. This mindset existed for generations. Grandparents kept gold rings. Families passed silver coins to children. These traditions returned because the world is once again uncertain. In many countries, the demand for gold is rising. People buy small pieces. Some buy bars, some buy jewelry. In busy markets from India to Africa, shops stay crowded. Shoppers know exactly why they are there. They are protecting their future. Governments also act quietly. Some countries increased their gold reserves in recent years. They did not announce fear. They simply prepared. These movements tell a clear story. Old money still matters. But gold and silver are not perfect. They do not pay interest. They do not grow businesses. They do not create innovation. They are protection, not progress. This is why Kiyosaki says, metals are part of a strategy, not the whole strategy. In his view, the modern world requires a mix: education, skills, real assets, and some protection. Gold and silver sit in the protection category. Let us explore how people use metals in real life. During inflation, gold often rises because people search for something stable. During currency weakness, gold becomes a shield. During market crashes, gold may fall at first, then rise again when fear grows. Silver behaves differently. It is cheaper. It is used in industry. Its price moves faster, up and down. But for many families, silver is easier to buy. It allows people with low savings to still feel secure. In many places, silver coins are the first step into old money, a small protection, a small anchor. This chapter does not tell people what to buy. It explains why gold and silver return every time the world becomes uncertain. The modern system is strong, but it moves fast. Digital wealth rises and falls in minutes. Debt grows. Currencies shift. Markets react to every headline. Gold does not react. It does not care. It simply exists. And because it exists in this calm, solid way, people respect it. At the end of this chapter, one question becomes important. If old money protects people during crisis, what can we learn from past collapses? What patterns repeat? What mistakes return? And most importantly, are we ignoring the lessons of history? Chapter 6. When the next shock arrives. Lessons from 2008 and 2020. Crises do not appear suddenly. They grow in silence, slowly, like a small crack that becomes a deep break. The world often sees the danger too late, and when the shock arrives, everything changes in one moment. This chapter explores two major crises, 2008 and 2020, and the lessons they offer for the future. Not to create fear, but to understand how the global system reacts when pressure becomes too strong. The story begins in 2008. It was a year that millions will never forget. People lost homes, banks collapsed, companies closed, jobs disappeared. The world entered panic. But the crisis started earlier, years before the collapse. Banks gave loans easily. People bought homes they could not afford. Investors believed prices would rise forever. Debt grew without control. Everyone trusted the system. And trust became the problem. When home prices finally stopped rising, the chain broke. Homeowners could not pay. Banks held loans that were worth far less than expected. Investors lost confidence. Fear spread faster than information. Markets fell across continents. The shock traveled from New York to Europe, from Europe to Asia, from Asia to every small economy in the world. This was the first big lesson. The global system is connected. When one part fails, the rest feels the impact. Governments responded quickly. They printed money. They lowered interest rates. They rescued banks. They tried to stop the fall. The actions worked, but they created a new pattern. The world learned to depend on intervention. Governments and central banks became the emergency engine of the global economy. 12 years later, in 2020, another shock arrived. This time, it was not financial. It was medical. A virus spread across the world. Countries closed borders. People stayed home. Businesses stopped. Airlines grounded planes. Factories slowed. The shock was sudden. Unlike 2008, there were no warning signs in markets, no slow decline, no visible cracks. But the result was the same global panic. Governments again used the same tools. They printed large amounts of money. They gave support to companies and workers. They lowered interest rates to zero. They wanted to protect the system. The actions saved the economy, but they also had consequences. More money in circulation meant higher prices later. People spent more. Supply chains struggled. Inflation rose. And debts grew even faster. Now the world faces the combined effects of both crises: high debt, high uncertainty, and rising global tension. This brings us to the next lesson. Crises do not end when markets recover. They leave long shadows. Families still feel the effect of 2008. Some lost homes forever. Some lost savings. Some lost trust in banks. Workers still feel the effect of 2020. Some lost jobs. Some never returned to normal life. Some changed careers. The world became more sensitive to shocks. Smaller events create bigger reactions. Markets move faster. Fear spreads quicker. Kiyosaki warns that the next shock may not look like 2008 or 2020. It may come from a different place. Debt, currencies, political conflict, supply chains, or technology failure. But the pattern will be familiar. A small problem turns into a big one. Confidence falls. Investors run to safety, governments intervene, and millions feel the impact. The real question is not if a shock will come, but how prepared people are when it happens. Preparation does not mean panic. It means understanding how the system reacts. In 2008, people who understood debt avoided risky loans. In 2020, people with savings survived difficult months. In both crises, people with knowledge made better decisions. This is why financial education matters today more than ever. Not to predict the future, but to avoid becoming a victim of it. Another lesson from past crises is the power of resilience. After 2008, new industries rose: technology, online services, digital communication. After 2020, remote work expanded. Health systems improved. New solutions appeared. Crises destroy, but they also transform. This transformation is important. It shows that the world does not break forever. It adapts, it rebuilds, it finds new ways to function. Still, the cost is high. People suffer before solutions appear. Families feel pressure. Economies slow. Kiyosaki's message is simple. Prepare when times are calm. Because when the storm arrives, it is too late to learn how to swim. So how do people prepare? By learning how money works, by saving wisely, by avoiding unnecessary debt, by understanding risk, by building real skills, by keeping a balance between hope and caution. The past shows us this truth. Crises come and go, but knowledge stays. And that brings us to the final question of this chapter. If the world has already survived 2 big shocks, what signs should we watch for the next one? Chapter 7. Preparing the Future. Wealth, Skills, and Smart Choices. The world is changing fast, faster than governments expect, faster than families can adapt, faster than the old financial system was designed to handle. This final chapter looks at one simple question. How can ordinary people prepare for an uncertain future? Robert Kiyosaki's message is not about fear. It is about readiness. It is about understanding how the system works, so you do not become a victim when the next shock arrives. Preparation begins with one powerful idea. Knowledge is protection. In the past, people believed that a good job was enough, a salary, a stable company, a fixed routine. But modern crises showed that stability is fragile. A job can disappear. A company can close. A market can fall in hours. This is why financial education matters, not complex theories, not advanced formulas. Just clear understanding of 3 things: how money moves, how debt grows, and how risk spreads. Let us start with money. Money today is fast. It moves across borders instantly. It reacts to news in seconds. It changes value without warning. So people need to know how to manage it calmly. Saving is not enough. Spending is not enough. People must learn to think like observers, not just consumers. A person who understands money makes different decisions. They avoid emotional purchases. They avoid dangerous loans. They build a small safety net. They think long-term. The next step is skills. Skills are the new currency. Jobs change quickly. Industries transform. Technology replaces old tasks. But skills survive. A person with strong skills, communication, problem solving, digital tools, creativity, can adapt to change. They can move between industries. They can reinvent themselves. They can survive economic shocks. Kiyosaki often says, "Do not rely on one income." He does not mean everyone must start a business. He means people should develop abilities that create opportunities. A new skill can become a side job. A side job can become a business. A business can become freedom. The next part of preparation is real assets. Assets are not only houses or gold. Assets are anything that gives value over time: a skill, a tool, a small business, education, knowledge, land, or equipment. These assets grow even when markets fall. They help people stay calm when the world becomes unstable. They create independence. Another important element is risk management. Risk is not the enemy. Ignoring risk is the enemy. People make mistakes when they refuse to look at danger. A family that understands risk does not borrow more than they can handle. They do not spend money they do not have. They do not follow quick profit promises. They stay balanced. This balance is the difference between surviving a crisis and being overwhelmed by it. Let us look at everyday life. A family faces higher prices. Rent increases. Food becomes expensive. Energy costs rise. These are not small problems. They create stress. They push people to borrow more. They weaken their future. But a prepared family reacts differently. They adjust their budget early. They track spending. They avoid unnecessary debts. They build a small emergency fund. Even a little preparation creates stability. Now let us look at the bigger picture. The global economy moves in cycles. Periods of growth, periods of slowdown, periods of crisis. These cycles will continue. People cannot control global events. They cannot control wars or interest rates or government decisions, but they can control how they respond. This response begins with calm thinking, the ability to separate fear from fact, the ability to understand what matters and what does not matter. Kiyosaki believes the strongest protection is the mind. A trained mind sees opportunities even in difficult times. A fearful mind sees danger in everything. This is not motivation. It is strategy. Opportunities exist even during crisis. New businesses rise. New industries grow. New solutions appear. People who stay alert see these openings. But people who panic miss them. Another part of preparation is community. History shows that people survive crises better when they support each other. Families help families, neighbors help neighbors. Communities share information, resources, and solutions. A strong network is an invisible asset. Finally, preparation requires acceptance. Acceptance that the world will continue to change. Acceptance that old systems may weaken. Acceptance that new systems will rise. This acceptance removes fear. It replaces shock with readiness. It allows people to walk forward with confidence. The message of this chapter is not complicated. It is simple, practical, and realistic. Learn, save, prepare, adapt, grow, because the world may face new shocks, economic, political, technological, but people with knowledge and skills will always find a way through. The future is uncertain, but uncertainty is not the end. It is the beginning of a new chapter. a chapter where the strongest tool is not money, not gold, not markets, but the ability to learn, think, and act with clarity.